I'm just kidding. Yes.
Well, thanks for the question.
Yeah, you bet.
So we talked to Freedom Caucus Chairman Good earlier this
Mhm.
week, and he said that Republicans' main leverage right now is shutting down the government, and that without massive spending cuts and appropriations bills, that's what you should do. I'm just curious where the conference stands on this and whether it's come up over the past couple of days of the retreat.
It has not. It was a part of a bigger conversation about how we use the power of the purse at the leadership retreat. I'm just telling you, my recollection is that the discussion of how do we use the power of the purse to do what is the one remaining item that all of us, I think, would like to see a different outcome in with respect to the border. We use the power of the purse, Republicans led, in negotiating a debt ceiling to bring down expenses year over year on the discretionary side. We've used our oversight and subpoena power to get good policy and regulatory outcomes. I think for me as a Texan especially, it's very personal. There's not a more important job of the federal government than to provide for a common defense. And there is no defense of our sovereign border. In fact, it's been surrendered to terrorist drug cartels. They're doing bad things to this country and bad things to the people who we've invited over here by virtue of our open border. So that is the remaining big item that I know the speaker feels the same way as I just expressed. And he's got to figure out a way to get to a better outcome. Ultimately, it's going to require a new president, because I don't think this president is committed to changing course. I wish he had the political will to go against the open border left, but he doesn't. He hasn't demonstrated that, and I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm going to fight for Texas' right, constitutional right of self-defense, because I think that's the last line of defense right now. But those are the conversations that happened at the leadership retreat that I'm going to defer to Speaker Johnson as to how to lead us beyond that first tranche of appropriations bills into the second and some of these supplemental bills. I'm going to let him lead that effort. Kadia, and then we'll kind of work our way back.
So we saw former Chair Kevin Brady earlier.
Yes.
And he said he was advising the conference on reconciliation.
Yes.
So I am curious, what instructions do you think you need for reconciliation? And would you use it to cut spending? What is
Yes.
neutral? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think we would use it on the outlay side and on the revenue side, or expense and revenue. We saw tremendous economic growth, record actually, investment, growth, job creation. We saw the lowest poverty rates in recorded history because all boats were rising on the tide of prosperity. All we did, and I wouldn't take credit for it, and I wouldn't give Washington politicians, even the good ones, credit. We just removed the burden of government off the back of our job creators, our risk takers, our investors, and they did the rest. And in contrast to the wage suppression that my colleague from California mentioned, we saw wages increase, the highest levels, I think, in about a quarter of a century. And people were having enjoying a better quality of life and a better standard of living. They had better options. So you know that there's a fiscal cliff in 25 where many of these provisions on the TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, will expire. That's something that I don't think is any secret. Republicans are looking at as part of a broader pro-growth agenda. Regulatory reform, as I mentioned, work incentives to get people out of the government dependence trap and tapping into their God-given talent with just common sense work requirements, patching up all the loopholes and the workarounds for work-capable, healthy people. So those are things on the revenue side. And then, of course, on the expense side, you're talking to the budget chairman, who's been the Paul Revere of, I hope I've been an effective one, to sound the alarm that a sovereign debt crisis, we are nearing the precipice of a debt-related crisis of some sort, whether it's a sovereign crisis like Greece or not, it will be irreparable. It will be irreparable to this country, to our economy, to our future leadership, to our children's future in this country. So we need to, wow. I think she's trying to tell me I may be going a little long. But the expense side, you cannot grow out of the level of debt that we're in today. You cannot grow when you're borrowing $3 trillion in just the past 12 months, and your interest alone is almost $1 trillion. So we have to start reducing the expense side and the big drivers on the mandatory spending. And we talked about that. It's going to require tremendous political will, but I think the American people don't want to bankrupt their country and their children and grandchildren's future in it.
How much did you say that last hour cost us in interest?
Yeah, in the hour we were having our presentation on reconciliation, our nation borrowed $8 billion. And so it's a couple hours and you've got more borrowing than the whole economic output of the country of France, Italy, and about every other OECD country outside the top 5. I mean, the wheels are coming off. We got to do something about it. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, and then yes, sir. Yes, sir. She said one more question, but I'm going to fight through it. I'm going to fight through it. I'm going to let Kevin answer this or Carol.
I have a quick question on U.S. steel. President Biden said in his statement today,
Don't look at
trade.
me.
U.S. steel
Yeah.
should remain an American company that is domestically owned and operated. So what is your reaction to this? Do you agree with it?
I think that President Trump's America First trade agenda was the right agenda. I think we have to be able to maintain the capacity with certain materials, for example, steel, to make war machines and other materials that have a national security import. I think that's I think the gist of his rationale for talking about steel and aluminum and other things. So without getting into the weeds on it, I would say that the NAFTA 2.0, which was USMCA, and his trade agenda that basically leveled the playing field and then took the areas where there was a threat to national security and addressed that so that we could build up greater capacity was a very smart but I think common sense approach to making sure America's at the fore on trade. It's significant, especially in an ag district. We are very trade dependent, and it got better under President Trump's trade policy. Last question.
Last year, the House didn't vote on a budget, going forward. This year, do you have assurances from the Speaker that a budget will be put on the floor?
I have assurances that they're going to do everything they can to get. I mean, we have to get the numbers right. We're just a margin of one now. So I know that Mike Johnson, my dear friend and our fearless leader, along with Steve Scalise and the whole leadership team, is behind me and the Budget Committee's effort to put our fiscal framework on the floor. What would be great is if we put President Biden's budget alongside of it. And let's see how many of my Democrat colleagues will endorse $5 trillion in new taxes or 15% increase in spending over that 10 years, the highest spending per GDP in the history. I bet we wouldn't get half the Democrats to endorse it, but I think we can get there on the Republican side because I think it's straightforward. As Kadia asked, we got to reduce the spending, we got to reform entitlements, and we've got to grow this economy. And I think that most of my Republican colleagues are excited to have a vote on it. And some of them are probably more excited to have the Democrats vote on President Biden's budget. But yeah, I think we're going to get there. And I do have the support. We just have to get the numbers. So anyway, that's going to be it because, but I'll take your question on the side after we close. Thanks for covering us here this weekend, and we appreciate